The boardroom was tense with anticipation as my stepmother, Dianna James, wrapped up her presentation. Her words had been a sharp critique of my leadership, and the room was filled with expectant silence. 20 pairs of eyes darted nervously between us, waiting for my reaction to her scathing evaluation. "Thank you for your concerns," I responded, my voice unwavering. "However, as my father's chosen successor and the majority shareholder, I trust my performance over the years speaks volumes." Diana's smile was all sweetness, but there was a coldness in it. "Olivia, darling," she began, her tone dripping with condescension, "managing a small marketing division hardly qualifies you to lead James Global. The board deserves a CEO with true experience. My name is Olivia James, and 2 months ago, my father's sudden death thrust me into a ruthless power struggle I never asked for. Michael James had built James Global into a $4 billion technology titan from the ground up, earning both reverence and resentment along the way. I was his only child, though Diana seemed intent on erasing that fact entirely. Your marketing division," Diana continued, flipping to another slide, "represents a mere fraction, less than 2%, of the company's revenue. In contrast, the divisions I've managed have shown a solid 15% growth annually." What she conveniently left out was how those divisions had actually achieved that growth. 3 days ago, I found the truth, hidden in an encrypted folder on my father's laptop, but I maintained my composure, remembering the last thing he had said to me. "The timing, Lev," he whispered from his hospital bed, clutching my hand. "Promise me you'll wait for the right moment." Watching Diana make her calculated pitch for the CEO role, I finally understood what he meant. She was so sure of herself, too sure. She had the board, the numbers, and a perfect strategy to push me out of the way. Furthermore, Diana gestured to another chart. "Olivia lacks the international experience necessary for our expansion. She's never lived abroad, while I spent 5 years managing operations in Europe." I caught the eye of Thomas Chin, my father's oldest friend and a longtime board member, who watched me with a mix of sympathy and caution. He'd been warning me for weeks that Diana was plotting something. I gave him a barely noticeable nod, signaling I was fine. "I moved to call a vote," Diana announced. "For the good of the company, we must act quickly. The markets are watching." "This is highly irregular," Thomas interjected, his voice firm. Michael's will was crystal clear about succession. Diana's smile remained unwavering. "Wills can be contested when there's evidence of diminished capacity. Michael was ill for months before his passing, and his judgment was compromised." The accusation hung in the air like a dark cloud. My father, the brilliant strategist who had outfoxed rivals for years, was now being painted as too unwell to know what he was doing when he named me his successor. "I have documentation," Diana continued smoothly, "from his doctors, detailing his condition in those final months, and statements from key employees about some questionable decisions he made. All of it was fabricated, but the board didn't know that. They had witnessed my father's decline firsthand, watched him grow frail. Diana made sure she was always at his side, controlling every aspect of his care, deciding who could visit, what treatments he received." I quietly opened my laptop, pretending to look over some notes while actually monitoring the live feed from Diana's office. As expected, Marcus Foster, her trusted lieutenant, was letting himself in using the key she'd given him. In exactly 17 minutes, he would find what I'd planted for him to find. "Perhaps," I said, my tone careful, "it would be wise to take some time and review all documentation, including my father's personal records." Diana's gaze sharpened. "I don't see why we need to delay. The situation is clear." "Is it?" I replied, watching as Marcus began to sift through Diana's office. "Are you sure there's nothing else the board should know before making such an important decision?" A flicker of unease passed over her face. Then, her phone buzzed. I knew exactly what the text said: "We have a problem." She glanced at her phone, then back at me. The first crack in her facade was visible. "Maybe," I continued, my voice steady, "it's time we discussed the true numbers behind those growing divisions, the ones that don't show up in the official reports." The color drained from Diana's face. "I don't know what you're implying," she stammered. "No implications," I replied calmly, "just facts. Would anyone like to see them?" I pulled a thick folder from my briefcase, copies of everything I had uncovered in my father's hidden files, evidence of Dianna's intricate scheme to inflate profits, cover up losses, and systematically siphon money from the company. 2 of 2. This meeting is adjourned, Dianna announced abruptly, rising to her feet. We'll reconvene once everyone has had time to. Sit down, I said quietly. The steel in my voice, so much like my father's, froze her mid-step. Around the table, the board members sat in stunned silence as I opened the folder and began laying out documents with deliberate precision. 3 years ago, I began evenly. Someone began manipulating the financial records of our European operations. What followed was an hour-long autopsy of Dianna's deception. Document by document, I led the board through the intricate fraud she'd orchestrated, how she'd siphoned millions from the company, disguised as growth, buried beneath layers of doctored reports and fake vendors. These statements, I said, pulling up a spreadsheet on the screen, trace funds routed to offshore accounts controlled by shell corporations. All of them conveniently registered by Dianna's brother, in the Cayman Islands. This is ridiculous, Dianna snapped, but her voice had lost its confidence. These are forgeries. Are they? I turned to her, meeting her eyes. Like the fabricated medical records you submitted to cast doubt on my father's mental capacity? I clicked to the next slide, grainy surveillance footage from my father's hospital room. Dianna's face drained of color as she watched herself on screen, speaking to his doctor. I need you to alter his medication records, she said. Make it appear like his cognitive decline is accelerating. The doctor's reply was crisp. That would be illegal, Mrs. James. And profitable, she countered, reaching for her checkbook. I paused the video. The silence in the room was suffocating. My father knew, I said quietly. He discovered what you were doing, long before he passed. But he didn't act immediately. He chose to gather proof. To expose every thread of your scheme. Thomas Chin leaned forward, his expression grim. That's why he insisted on the last-minute security upgrades. The new surveillance systems, the encrypted backups. I nodded. He gave me access to those files 3 days before he died. Every conversation, every transaction, recorded and secured. Finally, Dianna's lawyer, Finn, broke the silence. These recordings, if they exist, were obtained without consent. They'll never hold up in court. Maybe not, I said. But this isn't a courtroom. This is a boardroom. And the people in this room deserve the full truth before deciding who should lead this company. Another slide. A side-by-side comparison of the actual financial health of our European divisions versus the falsified reports Dianna had presented. In reality, they were bleeding money, over $300 million lost, concealed through a web of shell companies, creative accounting, and falsified audits. These losses were carefully hidden, I continued, clicking through charts and statements. Stolen and rerouted under the guise of growth. Care to explain that, Dianna? She stood abruptly, scooping up her papers. I don't have to sit through this, she snapped. My lawyers will. Sit down, I said again, firmer, colder. You wanted a vote on leadership. Let's have it. But first, let's finish laying out the facts. Slide after slide, I revealed everything: internal emails between Dianna and her co-conspirators, bank records of illicit transfers, even footage of her meeting with competitors, trading our trade secrets for kickbacks. And as for those glowing performance reviews you've been citing, I added, pulling up the last piece of evidence, let's see how those were really earned. Security footage showed Dianna coercing employees, offering promotions in exchange for false statements against me, threatening anyone who questioned her narrative. Enough, Thomas said firmly. We've seen more than enough. He turned toward Dianna, his tone ice-cold. Mrs. James, in light of these revelations, I believe you should resign, immediately. Finn whispered urgently in her ear, but she shoved his hand away. This isn't over, she hissed at me. You have no idea what you're doing, you foolish girl. I held her gaze, the years of veiled insults and manipulation flashing through my mind. Actually, I said, voice calm and clear, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm protecting my father's legacy and making sure justice is served. Right on cue, the boardroom doors opened. 2 FBI agents stepped inside, followed by a team of forensic accountants. "Mrs. Dianna James," one agent announced, "you are under arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit corporate espionage." Gasps echoed around the room as the agents read her rights and led her away in handcuffs. Her carefully composed mask shattered. When the doors closed behind her, silence lingered until Thomas cleared his throat. "Well," he said, straightening, "I believe we still have a leadership vote to hold." He looked around the table. All in favor of confirming Olivia James as CEO? Every hand rose. In the days that followed, James Global was thrust into the spotlight. The headlines were relentless. "Stepmother's plot unraveled by founder's daughter." I spent those weeks buried in my father's office, my office now, working with investigators to fully dismantle Dianna's fraudulent empire. The depth of her deception was staggering. And the damage, far-reaching. But step by step, we were rebuilding. Restoring. My father had always believed in legacy. And now, it was mine to protect. We uncovered dozens more schemes, bringing the total losses to just under $500 million. Late one evening, as I was knee-deep in more financial records, Thomas Chen knocked on my office door. "You're working too hard," he said, placing a cup of coffee in front of me, "just like your father used to." I leaned back, rubbing at the tension behind my eyes. "There's still so much to fix, Thomas. Every time we think we've found it all, something else comes crawling out." He took a seat across from me, his expression more solemn than usual. "There's something you should know, something your father told me before he died." I set down the file. Thomas wasn't just a board member. He had been my father's closest confidant for over 30 years. He knew he was dying long before he let anyone else in on it. Thomas said quietly, even before Dianna started tampering with his medical records, "But he needed time to put things in motion, to make sure you were ready." "Ready for what?" "For this." He gestured around the office. He knew Dianna would make her move the moment he was gone. That's why he installed the cameras. That's why he gave you access to the servers. He wasn't just gathering evidence, he was building your case for you. My chest tightened, but I forced back the tears. Why didn't he confront her himself? Why let her keep stealing? Thomas hesitated, then gave a faint smile. Because stopping her wasn't enough. He wanted to end her. He wanted to make sure she could never hurt this company, or you, again. And he wanted the world to see you for who you really are, not just his daughter, a leader. The next morning, I visited Dianna in prison. She sat stiffly across from me, her orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to the woman who once walked our boardrooms like royalty. Her nails were chipped, her eyes were bloodshot. "Come to gloat?" she asked, her voice low and bitter. "No," I said calmly. "I came to ask you something." She arched an eyebrow. "Curiosity? How noble." "Why?" I asked. "You had the lifestyle, the status, my father's trust. Why risk it all?" She laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "You really don't get it, do you? I had nothing. Everything belonged to your father. And it was all going to you, his perfect little princess." The words dripped with venom. "I was a trophy wife. I could never compete with your dead mother. So you decided to steal what you couldn't inherit." "I decided to take what I deserved," she snapped. "I built those European divisions from the ground up. I brought in the deals, but no matter how much I did, I was always second place to you." I studied her face, not with anger, but understanding. She never wanted partnership. She wanted control. "You're wrong," I said. "My father would have taken care of you. He made sure of that in his will. But you couldn't wait. You had to take more. And now, you've lost everything." Her jaw tightened. "You think you've won? You have no idea what it takes to run this company. You will fail, and when you do, they'll see I was right." I stood, buttoning my jacket. "Goodbye, Dianna. Enjoy the next 20 to 30 years." Back at James Global, I called an all-hands meeting. Standing at the podium, looking out over a sea of wary, tired faces, some hopeful, some hardened, I took a breath. "The past few months have tested us," I began. "We've uncovered betrayal. We've endured scandal. But James Global was never built on deception. It was built on vision, on innovation, on integrity. And those values didn't die with my father. I laid out our new direction: transparency, accountability, ethics as non-negotiable pillars of our culture. The response was electric. People were hungry for change, and for something they could believe in again. The year that followed was one of rebuilding and reckoning. The European divisions, once Diana's personal playground, finally became profitable. With new leadership, stricter oversight, and honest reporting, we rebuilt trust, internally and externally. And slowly, the James Global name began to shine again. One evening, almost a year to the day after Diana's arrest, I found myself once more at my desk long after dark. City lights sparkled below as I leaned back in my chair, remembering something my father once told me. Success isn't just about making money, Liv. It's about looking yourself in the mirror and knowing you earned it. My phone buzzed. A text from Thomas. Your father would be proud. Dinner next week to celebrate the quarter? I smiled and typed back. Wouldn't miss it. Diana's conviction made headlines once again. Ex-James Global exec gets 25 years in prison. Her co-conspirators flipped, exposing even more rot. But none of that mattered to me anymore. Because the real win wasn't in seeing her punished, it was in proving my father was right to believe in me. The board, once skeptical, now backed me fully. A year to the day after I became CEO, I stood alone in my father's office, looking at the photo of him smiling down from the wall. You knew, I whispered, you knew exactly what she'd do, and you left the breadcrumbs. There was no reply, but I could almost hear his voice. You did good, kid, you did good. I sat down, opened my laptop, and reviewed the next round of expansion proposals. James Global was growing again, but this time, with roots in real success, not illusion. Diana's betrayal had nearly destroyed everything, but in the end, it only made us stronger. She thought she could steal his empire. Instead, she handed it to me. And now, from the inside of a prison cell, she had nothing but time to reflect on just how badly her plan had failed. Because the company she tried to control was thriving without her. Led by the very woman she tried to erase. Sometimes, justice doesn't just catch up, it leads.